Two Jews, it already sounds funny, longtime enemies, meet at the synagogue on Yom Kippur. One says to the other, as a gesture of forgiveness, "I wish for you what you wish for me." The other immediately retorts, "Already you're starting?" The late philosopher and critical thinker Jacques Derrida retells that joke in his book, Acts of Religion. Derrida suggests that sometimes forgiveness is unsolvable, bottomless, an irresistible whirlpool thrusting us into the abyss of impossibility. So, how do we close the book on forgiveness? How do we escape the whirlpool? More importantly, how do we even open the book for true, meaningful consideration of forgiveness in the first place? If you've followed Stephen Colbert over the past few years, you've probably caught one of his 1888 Oops Jew. One of his 888 Oops Jew sketches. Colbert set up a forgiveness hotline during the week leading up to Yom Kippur. He explained the concept of the Jewish Day of Atonement to a national audience. Millions of viewers listened as Steven Spielberg, Mortimer Zuckerman, Larry King, and others, Jews, would call in on the white phone emblazoned with a large blue Magen David, a Jewish star. The purpose? Well, so that Colbert could help his Jewish friends, that they could pick up the phone and offer apologies to him, to Stephen Colbert, for the wrongs they had committed against him. Imagine a phone to call. The funniest thing about the sketch, of course, is that Stephen Colbert is not Jewish. He sits high and mighty on the throne of his late-night show while his Oops Jewish friends phone in to beg for forgiveness. But maybe Colbert is onto something. On the Day of Atonement, right here in the synagogue, we are all Oops Jews. Oops. Oops. No one is so high and mighty as to be excused from atonement. You've heard the story about the rabbi who calls upon his congregants to raise their hands if they're ready to forgive their enemies. Slowly, each hand of each congregant goes up, all except one, the 98-year-old Bubby in the back row. "Bubala," calls the rabbi, "have you no compunction to forgive?" "No, Rabbi," the Bubby answers. "It's just that I have no enemies." "Amazing," says the rabbi. "Can you please tell us all here in the congregation how you made it to 98 years old and you have no adversaries?" "Simple," said the Bubby. "I outlived them all." Friends, and I mean it, we are friends in this community. We disagree sometimes, might raise a voice, but we're friends. That's what makes this a holy community. Let me say something to you. If we are so lucky as to outlive our foes, to outpace our enemies, then perhaps, like the Bubby, we don't need to raise our hands. But for those of us who have not made it there yet, who are in the thick of it right now, who have made messes, who have been wronged, who burn with anger, we are the Oops Jews. We are human. And today, Yom Kippur is our hotline. Where do we start? Pick up the phone and say, "I'm sorry," 3 times over. 3 times, you say, Rabbi? Doesn't that sound like a bit much? The 12th century rabbi, Moses Maimonides, teaches us to repeat our apology 3 times so as to show sincere remorse, to take responsibility, and to avoid repeating the wrong. These 3 repetitions of atonement may actually have originated in the ancient temple in Jerusalem. Yom Kippur Day crescendos with the Avodah, the sacred service which tells how the high priest entered the Holy of Holies, pronouncing the ineffable name of God. There in the Holy of Holies, the Kohen Gadol modeled the process of apologizing. Just as the liturgy contains 3 confessionals, we consider it as well. First, he requested forgiveness for his own mistakes. Second, he begged forgiveness for his family. In the 3rd confessional, he sought forgiveness for all people, all humanity. That moment when the high priest entered the Holy of Holies, earth and heaven would connect for an instant. According to Rabbi Luri Amichai, that moment, invisible to everyone except him, would ripple out into space and time as a ritual of restoration. Tomorrow morning, the cantor and I reenact that holy hour as we will bow down to the ground during the Avodah service. The truth is, though, as Rabbi Amichai says, there is no temple standing anymore in Jerusalem, only memory and metaphor. So my view right now is that each and every one of us can enter our own version of the Holy of Holies. It's our hotline. We can. But do we dare? Am I truly ready to look eye to eye with eye? And if I am, can I proclaim to God's presence, I am here, Hineni, to deal with what I must? It's not simple, and it wasn't simple for the high priest. When the high priest went into the Holy of Holies, there was a rope that was tied around his waist in case he fainted, in case he wasn't sincere enough, or my feeling, if he died of heartbreak, overwhelmed by the burden of forgiveness. Perhaps we still need a rope to say I'm sorry, to seek forgiveness, a sort of safety net as we enter our metaphoric Holy of Holies, Kodesh Kodashim. For some, though, the rope is an understanding that in some extreme cases, we may not be ready yet. Apology or forgiveness may exist on the fringes of our desires, but we cannot access it yet. Rabbi Jill Berkson Zimmerman, a very creative rabbi, wrote a prayer for those who are not ready to forgive. Here is an excerpt. There are many among us who have endured deep hurts this year and some from many years ago. For the woman who was violated, for the man beaten down, and for anyone with a broken heart or a crushed soul who might not yet be ready to forgive, it's okay. Take your time. Sometimes the timetable of the High Holy Days doesn't match the rhythm of your heart. May you have faith that the path will open up. And so we return Yom Kippur year after year. Why, though, is something that we want so badly so difficult to attain? Little children seem to display forgiveness naturally. After a fight or an injury, one says, "I'm sorry," and they resume playing. We actually teach our children to say, "I'm sorry." Rarely do we need to teach them to forgive. It comes naturally. My daughter Charlotte, a true sweetness, actually mixes up "I'm sorry" and "I forgive you." She uses them interchangeably, and I smile each time. Perhaps as adults we can reignite the forgiving spirit of our children. The avoda service in the ancient temple that I mentioned would be attended by thousands and thousands of people, standing shoulder to shoulder with very little space. But once the Kohen Gadol left the Holy of Holies and forgiveness had taken place, they all prostrated themselves. How could it be, where there was barely any room to stand, that they all had space to lie down? I'll tell you, because when we ask for forgiveness and we are forgiven, there's more space for life, and there's more space for love. How do we make that space? On Yom Kippur, forgiveness is not only an emotional experience, it's a set of actions, beating our heart, expressing words. So often, though, I hear about the hurts that have festered for too long. Recently, a couple lamented to me that their two grown children haven't spoken to each other in years. And truth be told, they can't even remember why they are boigas, why they're so alienated. They asked me for help. I recently saw these siblings, former B'nai Mitzvah students of mine, at a wedding this past summer. After some small talk and laughing, I asked, "Hey, what's with the two of you? You don't talk?" They both looked at me with a little surprise. I said, "Please, don't show up at your parents' funeral and realize that life has passed you. Yom Kippur is in a few weeks. Why don't you make believe that God is commanding you to reconcile? You'll see, it'll help." The siblings sent me a note this week that they would each apologize. They would let go of years of animosity and work on their sibling relationship. They are using Yom Kippur as their catalyst for reconciliation. Then there are exceptional cases where the human power of forgiveness truly approaches godliness. Here's one of those stories of superhuman forgiveness. Susan lost her adolescent son when a teenager inadvertently killed him in a drive-by shooting. At the trial, awash in grief and rage, she yelled out, "I want to kill you." A year later, Susan went to visit the young man in prison to confront him directly. She found out that prior to killing her son, the teenager had been living on the streets. He had no one. In fact, Susan was the only visitor in prison all year. By the end of his 3-year incarceration, Susan helped him find a job. She put him up in a spare room, the empty room that belonged to her slain son. Susan did the unfathomable. She adopted the young man. She became the mother of her son's killer. She became the mother he never had. Here is a truth about Yom Kippur. It offers the template of forgiveness and empowers us to restore the future of our relationships. After all, if we really, really believe that we flow from Adam and Eve, we are all complicit in the wrongs of the world, and we are all responsible for forgiving each other and making it better. On Yom Kippur, we are all high priests, entering our Holy of Holies, asking for forgiveness. The quintessential biblical story of forgiveness is the golden calf episode. It shows the power of communal forgiveness. Bless you. 40 days after the dramatic and mystical encounter on Mount Sinai, the Israelites build and worship a golden calf. You know the story. Moses comes down the mountain, sees the idolatry, smashes the tablets in fierce anger. How could it be? How is it possible? After revelation directly from God, after such a transformational moment of connection and closeness, the people could have sinned, betrayed God. Eventually, though, you know what happens? Moses asks and receives God's forgiveness for all the people of Israel. And you know what the tradition teaches us which day it is? Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, God forgives all the people of Israel for the golden calf episode. The broken tablets are placed in the ark right alongside the newly carved tablets that Moses creates, a sign, a symbol of the new connection, the reconnection between the people of Israel and God. In each and every one of our lives, we have golden calf moments, those moments of betrayal, times when we are deeply, deeply hurt, and times when we have hurt others. And you know what forgiveness means? Try again. Forgiveness means that we find our inner ark, the sacred place within each one of us, and each one of us has that sacred place which contains our brokenness. A mystical teaching offers the following insight, that forgiveness was created even before the world itself. In other words, the concept of forgiveness is bigger than we are, larger than you and me, encapsulating our entire world. Without forgiveness, we have no world. Today, we reconcile what we have done and what has been done to us. We contemplate it, consider it, and figure out what to do with it. Today, we are all oops Jews. Oopsie daisy. Oops Jews. Today, we all call the metaphorical hotline. Hello, shalom, I'm sorry. Pick up the phone. What will you say? Here is my prayer. May we live up to being in the image of God and ask for forgiveness. May God grant us the will and compassion to forgive as well. The coming year and our lives will be greatly blessed if we do so. Gemar Chatima Tova, may we be sealed for goodness in the book of life. Amen.